Just a note that for the first couple of minutes, the sound isn't in sync with the video, but it does correct itself. Let's get into this.
I think it's important for this court to hear from people who have known Mr. Anderson for the majority of his life about his character, because naturally that's not evidence that can come in during a trial. And I think it's important for the court to consider the character from the perspective of the defendant, and the defense believes that there's no one better to do that than Mr. Anderson's own family members. So
I understand why the defense would try this, but they don't get anywhere. They might have a better argument if this was a case where the accused made one horrible mistake in one moment of time and had otherwise led an exemplary life. But that's not even close to what happened. These horrific crimes took time to plan, and he engaged in an egregious course of conduct that included stalking and intentionally inflicting psychological pain on his ex.
So I'd ask the court to allow the defendant to present one individual to speak on his behalf.
I don't see a letter from him. So he could have offered one of these letters and had it come in more timely. Had there been one, I would have reviewed his thoughts, but I'm not seeing. There's one from someone who identifies.
There's one from Zenith Anderson, who is Mr. Anderson's sister. Judge, respectfully, the defense was not notified that we would not be able to have people speak.
I don't know why you would think that I can't remember when I ever did. And
that's fine. That's fine.
I've been here
it's
40
just...
years, and so I'm going to say no.
Okay. Well, then I will speak at length of Mr. Anderson's character as I know it, as over the last 3 years, I've gotten to know a very different side of Mr. Anderson than which was presented during the trial in this case.
Of course she knows a very different side of him, because that's what he has chosen to show her. He will behave in a way that he thinks is most useful to him. And even serial killers don't kill everyone they meet. More generally speaking, it's not unusual to hear people say, "But he never hurt me," as some sort of proof that he didn't hurt someone else. You might also hear, "But I know him," as if familiarity means safety or innocence. It does not. The fact that he does have or may have a different side doesn't negate his horrific, brutal, premeditated crimes. In the next clip, pay attention to what the judge says about rescuing a family from a burning building. This will come up later.
As the court's well aware, there are numerous rules of evidence that prevent certain types of things from coming in at a trial. Things that show the good side of Mr. Anderson, the good memories that people have, and the positive things in his life.
You know, I don't want to unnecessarily elongate this, but I have made exceptions. When someone offers me something about, well, 2 years ago he was walking down the street and there was a building that was on fire, and at risk of his own life he went in and rescued a whole family. That's something I would certainly want to hear about, and that would be different. But here, the first letter he gave me, she's telling me her passions in life are music and animals. I have too many dogs. I have a wonderful cat, a gorgeous buckskin quarter horse. The things I love most in this world are my son, my family, friends, and chocolate cake. That isn't going to help me.
Sure, Judge,
If you've got something of the type I mentioned that is especially commendable in the defendant's character, I certainly would welcome that. But just a general character endorsement by his brother would not generally have significance in the decision I have to make.
And I understand that, Judge. As I was saying, it's quite easy to focus on the negative aspect of someone when that's all that's been introduced. Mr. Anderson is a father, is a brother, is a son, and his entire life...
He does have a family, and he betrayed and destroyed his family with his crimes. He manipulated and used his own daughter. He stalked and psychologically tortured his daughter's mother. He planned, then viciously murdered the mother's new love interest. These things are not the mark of a good father. And other good memories don't erase this. They just make the betrayal that much more painful.
And his entire life, he has maintained those roles and has executed them. He has many good memories, and some of those memories were shared by others on the other side and in the letters that were provided to this court that I know the court had to review. Memories such as not cutting his hair until his daughter could cut his hair, teaching his daughter how to skateboard, being a supportive figure in not only his family's lives, but his friends as well. That was reflected in there. The state went at length to talk about how Mr. Anderson's prior record is indicative of his character and his denial and way to push off responsibility, and I don't think that's accurate. In fact, when we look at Mr. Anderson's record, there's really nothing there comparable to why Mr. Anderson sits in front of you today.
Nothing comparable? I think not. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been out in the community to commit the heinous crimes for which he sits before the court.
There's no history, no convictions of violence. That's not shown because that wasn't and isn't Mr. Anderson's character, despite the verdict in this case.
Despite the verdict? It's this case for which he is facing sentencing. And it is in his character, clearly. One could argue that premeditated homicide is unusual for him, but it is in his character. He did it. He himself will reveal more about his character in a few minutes.
The defense sits before you in an extremely uncomfortable position. We have a situation here, Judge, where the defendant maintains his innocence, yet we have a verdict. We have facts. The defendant at no point wants to discredit how individuals, family members of Mr. Gutierrez feels.
This really would be tricky for someone convicted when they're innocent. How do you show remorse for something you didn't do? When Mr. Anderson speaks, we will see how he handles this bit.
But I think we also need to look at the fact that even though the legislature enacted the mandatory minimum in this case, that being life, they also enacted this statute. And they did that because they recognize that there are things that can happen where an individual should be able to return back to society.
It's true that there are cases in which a person can return to the community, but this is not one of them. And she doesn't actually offer proof that it is. Mr. Anderson has demonstrated a pattern of behavior, of abuse of power, of cruelty, of callousness, and has shown himself to be jealous, dishonest, and delighting in causing pain to a woman he claims to love, his daughter's mother, and utter disregard for how his manipulations and abuses impact people, including his own daughter. It was who he is that culminated in a premeditated, vicious homicide and cover-up.
I don't want to go into all the details of the case. I got a lot of dispute about what was said, what was portrayed. I think the facts, with a little more scrutiny, tell a much different story than what the jury decided. And I don't think that things played out fairly.
Here we go. It's unfair. He has just had a trial during which the facts were closely scrutinized, and the defense objected frequently to what the prosecution wanted to introduce. Mr. Anderson's beef is not that the facts weren't scrutinized, but that the jury didn't see things his way.
I think that there's some things that are not just from our side, questions outstanding for both sides. And I don't think the court accomplished what it set out to do in any means if both sides are left with so many questions. And I don't.
Yeah, like what did you do with the body? The evidence proves the victim is dead. There's no question about that. Mr. Anderson denies the victim's family this information, yet he sits there and suggests questions means he's not guilty? The jury found him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Mr. Anderson could answer the questions, but he will not.
And I don't think, without going into the case, I don't think we really got to the heart of the matter.
The heart of the matter? What does he think that is? I thought the heart of the matter is that an innocent man was murdered and the jury had to determine whether or not there was proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crimes for which he was on trial. Mr. Anderson isn't coming right out to say so, but I suspect he has some long-standing grievances against his acts and that he feels justified in his behavior. I base this statement on everything learned about him through his behavior and communications. I will, however, leave open the possibility that I've misapprehended this particular remark of his.
What I can tell you is, I didn't kill anybody. What I can tell you is, I didn't stalk anybody. And what I can tell you is, I didn't dispose of any corpse. It's really weird to be sentenced for or convicted for it and soon to be sentenced for it, but I didn't, Judge. Kind of feels like there's no turning around on that now. I don't really know how to make a better statement of my opposition. But I disagree. I'm innocent. I don't know what you're going to decide. I don't know what you're all going to weigh. I don't even know how to represent my own character without having my family be able to testify on my behalf. But they do have some things that are relevant. I mean, even during the trial, there was a gentleman who tried to come up and talk to me. I think there was a comment about how now everything has happened during the trial. When he made that attempt, nobody really knew who he was, and I do know who he is. He's a man who I saved from assault in jail.
Remember a few minutes ago when the judge suggested that saving somebody would be something that would be considered? Yeah, Mr. Anderson heard that.
He's actually related to one of the jailers.
He throws in that the other guy is related to a jail guard. That might not seem relevant. After all, nobody should be assaulted regardless of who they're related to. But in Mr. Anderson's mind, it is relevant. Why, you ask? Because he's looking for as many hooks into the judge as he can find. Oh, hey, Judge, I saved someone, and they're related to someone who works in the same system as you. It's not enough for him that the man is a human being. He's showing you how he thinks. Having said all that, we don't know if what he's saying is true anyway. He has a history of dishonesty and manipulation.
And my heart went out to him because I know he appeared inebriated, and I know he struggles. And I know he was coming up here to talk to me because we got along so good.
He's trying to show he has empathy. And to him, it's relevant that he and this man got along well. Let's see how much empathy he expresses for the victims in this case.
But those tiny little moments throughout somebody's life, nobody accounts for those. But what they do a really good job of is making up all of these things that they want you to believe when they can label you as a monster.
It may be true that people don't account for all the little moments. Does he think that the sum of all those little moments in his life are bigger than the cruel crimes he has committed? Let's talk about little moments. Did anyone count all the little moments in Mr. Gutierrez's life? What of those? And what about all the little moments Mr. Gutierrez will never have? What about all the goodnight kisses, the joys and struggles, the laughter, love, and support that Mr. Gutierrez's children will never experience? What about all the little moments Mr. Gutierrez's mother will never have with her only son? And what of the long nights when Mr. Gutierrez's mother cries herself to sleep? We can't even begin to count those little moments, nor can we quantify the profound pain inflicted upon so many by Mr. Anderson. He suggests that the facts are made up. They're in a court of law here. Note the expression of disgust on his face when he says the word monster.
I still didn't. It's still weird. I want to be remorseful, and I am for the things that I did wrong. And you're welcome to sentence me for everything that I did wrong, just like the judge in South Dakota. The only thing that I disputed in that instance was whether or not I was coming back to Wisconsin with that, which the prosecution has now repeatedly made false statements about on their own assumptions, hoping that everybody in this courtroom, everybody that's watching this, would buy, oh yeah, he was bringing something back to Wisconsin. Not true. Was I caught with marijuana in my car? Yeah. Yeah, I was. Should I have? No. Had I bend the rules there? Broke them. Broke the rules. And when they said, hey, this is a problem, I said, well, I did knowingly, and I'll be held accountable for it. That's it. And if I killed somebody, whatever that situation was, I can tell you in my own heart it wouldn't be intentional. But if I didn't at all, a guy I never met, I don't really know what this is, but I didn't do it. I'm innocent, Judge. Not guilty. I'm innocent. So.
Thank you.
It would have been possible here to say he maintains his innocence and still express something for the victims. Even though, as we've seen, he wants to show the court he's a nice guy, that he has empathy, he expresses nothing for the victims. He seems to not realize that this is the spot to insert that. He could have acknowledged the suffering of the victims, the horrible nature of the crime, without admitting his guilt, but he does not.
When I came out of law school and took my first job right here in Kenosha, next period of years, maybe within 10 years, their mourning condition, but also where the judge, but like physicians at the hospital, when they have people brought in from a shooting incident, are not permitted to discriminate in order so as to preserve life. They're not allowed to treat the less serious.
Are you noticing Mr. Anderson's expressions? He doesn't want to listen to the judge go on, but he's also listening for indications things could go in his favor. You can see Mr. Anderson is sick with stress. At no other point in the trial did you see this, but now he's waiting to hear his fate.
Ended criminally, as has occurred in this case. Every life, what you did was frightening, horrible. And you can wag your head all you want, The jury found beyond a reasonable doubt that you did it. And
when the judge comments on the nature of the crime, and when he points out Anderson was found guilty, you can see Mr. Anderson's defiance and disdain and anger. It's not the blatant, overt expression you sometimes see with others. It's that reservoir beneath that oozes out of him. We saw this throughout the entire trial. That anger and contempt oozing out. Those people are scary.
The loss of these people is beyond measure. But it is important that they realize that I have this litany of factors that I must consider, and that what ultimately is the sentence that you receive is not the measure of the value of Mr. Gutierrez's life. Family, while I certainly don't expect them to agree with the outcome, should not take that as a comment by the law or by me or by the legislature or by the jury. People who are convicted of seventh offense, driving under the influence.
Judges have to show they fully considered the law and the facts. Just an aside here. I used to hate it when a judge talked a lot and you weren't sure which way he was going to land in the end. Usually you know pretty quickly, but sometimes they say things that make you unsure, and it's stressful for everybody. I've cut out most of the judge's comments. If you want to see all of it uninterrupted, there are channels on YouTube who show that.
Any sentence that I give you, well, not any sentence, but just about any sentence, is going to last long enough that you will be an old man before you would be considered, even if I do make you eligible for extended supervision. That has to be considered, is the sentence has to address the enormity of the crime. I was very, very moved by the testimony or the remarks today by the lives that were touched by your vicious criminal act. And I wondered, to what extent did this man even think about these things? Was he so wrapped up in himself that it didn't even matter to him the effect it would have on the people who loved him? So if I got into the issue of deserve, that would certainly be at the forefront. The degree of planning of the crime and the concealment is very concerning, and speak to long-term determination of lawless behavior. On the first count of the information, it is the sentence of the court that your custody be committed to the Department of Corrections for a period of 2 years, followed by a 2-year period of extended supervision. On the second count, for an identical sentence to be served consecutively. On the fourth count of the information, hiding a corpse, for a period of 6 years of initial confinement, followed by 5 years of extended supervision, to be served consecutively to counts 1 and 2. And on the third count of the affirmation. It is the sentence of the court that your custody be committed to the Department of Corrections for confinement in the Wisconsin State Prisons for the remainder of your life. This sentence is consecutive to and not concurrent with the sentences on the other 3 counts. The period of eligibility for extended supervision will not occur until 40 years following the date upon which you start the sentence on count 3.
Mr. Anderson is not going to change for the better. He doesn't think he needs to. The community is safer with him behind bars. Let's watch him walk out.